More jokes?
No.
You swear?
Yeah.
You're watching Channel 5.
Grasp. For defense, for attack. Maybe just for kicks. And many young Americans are doing just that. Now, among millions of them, the gun is health enemy number one.
If the violence reports being published this month were due to a virus, the American people and its leaders would be shouting for a cure.
Tonight, violence as a disease and the gun as its deadly carrier. We'll talk with former Surgeon General C. Everett Koop and with a former teenage gang member who became a cop, Carl McGill.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
The latest entry in the Simple Answers to Complex Problems sweepstakes comes from a man who is no stranger to controversy. C. Everett Koop, the former Surgeon General, has looked at the atrocious number of young Americans, especially young black Americans, dying of gunshot wounds every year. And Dr. Koop has proposed at least the beginnings of a solution. Restrict and monitor gun ownership the way we restrict and monitor those who own and drive cars. Dr. Koop makes that proposal because guns have become the second leading cause of death for teenagers in the United States. The leading cause of death among teenagers is automobile accidents. Since the use of automobiles is already regulated and licensed, that, in and of itself, raises an interesting question or two, which we'll put to Dr. Koop in just a few minutes. But first, Nightline correspondent Dave Marash with the incontrovertible reality of what should outrage all of us. Our children are being shot and are shooting one another in unprecedented numbers.
In America today, only car crashes kill more teenagers than guns do, and nothing kills as many African-American teenaged males as bullets.
They were found gagged, hands, feet, and duct tape on the mouth, and lying here, suffering, both have gunshot wounds in the head.
In Washington, America's capital city and murder capital, 1 out of every 440 African-American teenage boys will die from a gunshot. And in other places like Los Angeles, Detroit, and New Orleans, the statistics are just about as bad.
It is a distinction Los Angeles could do without. In deaths from gunfire, Los Angeles ranks number 2 nationwide in the number of black teens who die from gunshots.
This week in Washington, 2 corpses, boys 15 and 17, were found by children even younger.
They were found by elementary school children going to the weatherless schools who take a shortcut down the stairway here and through the parking lot.
The 2 bodies found here are part of what has become a cliche to call an epidemic of violence involving young black males. This week, 2 of the most influential men in American medicine said epidemic is more than just a play on words. Bullet wounds are as much a symptom of disease as ulcers or aneurysms. And they said it might be helpful to stop thinking of this bloodbath as a social problem to be solved and start thinking about it as an illness to be cured.
To look at the question as a public health question allows a variety of other approaches to be used new kinds of research, new thinking, new people to address the situation.
Dr. George Lundberg is the editor of JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association. He's devoting this entire issue to the bullet plague that is killing American teens in increasing numbers, blacks and whites and Asians of both sexes, from cities, towns, and suburbs. He compares the consequences to the deaths caused by smoking and car accidents.
Deaths from driving has been another good example in which the use of public health measures allowed research to find out why people were dying in road traffic crashes. And when we found out why, it was possible to change the nature of the injuries, to change the design of automobiles, to change the behavior of drivers.
Dr. Lundberg's sense of crisis is based on statistical surveys of deaths between 1987 and 89. Since then, things have gotten worse. Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, Greater Pittsburgh, was in the JAMA study the safest urban place for African-American teens. Not anymore.
Since then, we had 9 additional fatalities in black teenagers. So that's a substantial increase.
And just last week, reports Stanley Rideout, at a school in a Pittsburgh suburb, what might be called gunplay Los Angeles style.
Kids dove to the ground as this guy in a car drove by shooting. And he kept on shooting until he finally shot one of the students.
It's real easy to get a gun.
To students at Washington's Cardozo High School, gunshots are as common as thunderclaps, and corpses no rarer than lightning strikes.
I know people that got shot and killed over girls, drugs, shot over coats, shot over real stupid stuff.
People don't use the fists or anything like that. They take it so easy just using a gun or a weapon just to solve their problem.
It makes me feel scared because I don't know if I'm going to be next.
They become desensitized, kind of immune, and we don't know the long-range effects that it has on them.
The short-term effects are already being felt on health care in many American cities. Dr. Reid Tuckson used to run Washington's public health department.
We divert precious, needed resources that are already scarce away from those other illnesses and the prevention of other phenomenon over towards managing the consequences of violence. This is an American issue, and while these studies have focused on African-American males, let us not fail to realize that America is a violent country. So if we want to get to the root causes and get to the solutions for African-American males, let us decide as a nation that we will fix America.
Today's gunshots ricochet from inner cities to small towns and suburbs. And in all these places, violent crimes involving guns show an alarming increase. For all our differences in hometowns and lifestyles, we're fast becoming a nation united in premature death. I'm Dave Marash for Nightline in Washington.
When we come back, we'll be joined by the former Surgeon General C. Everett Koop and by a former teenage gang member who became a cop, Carl McGill.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Charles Schwab.
Everyone has a dream, a vision deep inside.
With all the mutual funds out there, I needed an easy way to help me compare them.
We make it easier to follow your own lead.
With Schwab's free mutual funds performance guide, I can compare track records on over 500 funds.
Always there to give you just the help you need.
Help yourself at Schwab today.
Four-Star Lighting wasn't saving what they'd hoped since leaving AT&T. Trefethen Vineyards was having trouble getting long-distance calls through on the first try. So they've come back to AT&T, and we want you back. Come back with AT&T Partners in Business. AT&T quality and 20% discounts to the 20 AT&T numbers you choose, or the area code you call most. We want you back. Call 1-800-222-0400.
Every time the Grand Prix comes to town, you dream about being a race car driver. Just because you're not a race car driver doesn't mean you can't have fun while you're driving. That's why your Ford dealers are having their Grand Prix of savings with the best deals of the year. Like the top Ford F-150. Grand Prix priced at just $10,877. That's less than $10,900 for America's favorite full-size truck 15 years running. But at this price, they're really moving fast. So stop dreaming and have some fun. The starting line is at your Ford dealer.
Sunday on This Week with David Brinkley. Television and the presidential campaign. Going directly to the people may be good for the candidates, but is it good for the country? Sunday.
C. Everett Koop helped to sound the alarm on AIDS when he was Surgeon General of the United States, and he took the controversial stand then of advising that Americans use condoms. Now he has turned his attention to violence as a health issue. He joins us from the Mary Hitchcock Medical Center in Lebanon, New Hampshire. Carl McGill could have ended up as a tragic statistic. As a teenager himself, he was a member of a gang in Los Angeles and had friends killed in gang violence. Now he's a cop, working the beat where today's gangs roam. Officer McGill is the president of the African American Police Officer Association. He joins us from our Los Angeles bureau. Dr. Koop, let me begin, as I began this program, by asking you what seems like an internal contradiction. You're suggesting we do with guns what we already do with automobiles. That is, we license people who use them. We keep some sort of control over the people who use them. Doesn't do a damn bit of good in terms of lowering the deaths, though, among teenagers who drive cars. What makes you think it's going to be any more successful with guns?
Well, let me say two things, Ted. First of all, if I had my choice, I'd get rid of handguns, and inasmuch as that seems impossible at the present time to do, this, I think, is a second best measure. The other thing that you can't tell me is what would happen with teenagers in cars if we didn't have them registered and licensed. I think it would be a lot worse.
I suggest what would happen with teenagers in cars is essentially what happens with teenagers in guns. They'd get them illegally, they'd drive them without licenses.
But I think that they would not have to know as much as they do now, little though that may be, and irresponsible as though they may seem. I think any effort you make at control has an effect on people who are frightened, who are law-abiding, and who try to do the right thing.
All right, let's turn to the man who knows more about that. I suggest, with all due respect, than either one of us, Officer McGill. Would it make a difference if these kids had to go through the same process to get a gun that they now have to go through to get an automobile driver's license?
Well, any type of restraint would help, but in most cases of violence that I've experienced and that I've seen from a young black male in the inner city or from a police officer in the inner city, I see that most offenders don't have driver's license themselves. Most of the drive-by shootings that we deal with vehicles that are unregistered and by persons who use those vehicles without a license. So I believe that the intentions are good, but what it does, it doesn't focus the attention on the problem. The problem is unregistered handguns. The law-abiding citizen will register their handgun, and the person who uses the handgun for criminal means don't follow the rules or the laws that we already have. And so I think that what we ought to do is toughen the law for the person who uses an unregistered handgun. That's where most of our problem is, of guns that aren't registered.
When you say toughen the law, what do you mean? And in fact, let me ask you to take a step back, if I may, and give me at least, Dr. Koop probably knows, but give me a little more of an education. Where do the youngsters get these guns?
Well, most of the kids get their guns from the streets. There's a big black market for handguns. It's like illegal drugs. I mean, we use a lot of resources to stop drugs from coming to this country, but yet drugs still hit our streets in America. These guns come from the same means. They come from a underworld where there's a big economy where guns are just flooded in through, not just from the gun stores or from burglaries or other means that are conventional. They come from our borders. We have a lot of merchants that come to our harbors from foreign countries. We have borders from the Canadian level to the Hispanic, to the Mexican level. So we have guns that are constantly coming in all means. So there's not really a means to control the way guns are onto the streets. What we have to deal with is like in California, there's no penalty for the unregistered handgun user. So what we need to do is look at our laws and that we already have in our books and strengthen them, where it could give law enforcement persons a tool to use. Right now, as I said before, there is no minimal penalty for using or having an unregistered handgun.
Let me go after Dr. Koop again for a moment, because I've known and admired you for quite a few years now, Dr. Koop, and I know that you're a lot more complex than you sometimes like to pretend. You know better than to think that simply licensing guns is going to make all the difference. What are you really after here? What are you trying to do beyond get some more attention for it?
Superficially, I'm right on the same track with Mr. McGill. What he'd like to do is see tougher law enforcement, but what he has to begin with is a law to enforce. I'm trying to give you two laws, one which is the same as registering a vehicle, that is, you register the gun, and the second law is that in order to own it, you have to be licensed, which means you have to meet certain minimal standards and you have to have some training in its use.
Let me give you both D.C. as an example. District of Columbia has one of the toughest gun control laws in the country and has, if not the highest, and certainly one of the 2 or 3 highest gun death rates in the country.
It's too local. Once you start with what I've suggested, then you begin to get a handle on people who manufacture guns and who distribute them. And if Mr. McGill is given a law with teeth in it and has penalties he can really slap on people, you'll begin to make a difference.
All right, but we were thinking of having someone from the NRA here as an answer, but as someone who would respond to you, you know, I think, what their answer to you is. Officer McGill, let me ask you, because I wanted to make it a somewhat broader and less political response.
Right.
Let me ask you what would happen if there were a national law of the kind that Dr. Koop is discussing.
Well, all it would do is take the guns out of the hands of the law-abiding citizen. It would take the constitutional right to own a gun away from the person who might use it in a home for protection. The criminal
not at all. Not at all. He's licensed.
Let me finish, sir. The criminal who uses a gun, and we have a lot of laws in the books right now, he doesn't care about any restriction or licenses. He won't go through that process. The only person who will go through it is the law-abiding citizen. So I think that it's like a car. You know, we have laws that require you to have a license and will require you to register your vehicle, but most of these guys who use handguns in a criminal manner do not even register the car. So, I mean, I'm not saying that what you're implementing or trying to implement is wrong. I think that that's not going to be a solution to the problem.
Dr. Koop, let me stop you right now, because I've seen you take a breath a couple of times now. I know you want to respond. I want to hear your response. We have to take a break. We'll be back with both of our guests, and we'll hear from Dr. Koop in just a moment.
Surprise you to learn who, over 30 years ago, was the first car maker to build cars with seat belts, to make safety glass standard, the first U.S. car maker to offer anti-lock brakes, and who today offers more models with dual airbags than any other manufacturer. That company is Ford Motor Company.
We're committed to making safety innovation an important part of quality.
Ford Motor Company. Quality is job one. It's working.
Know where I am? I'm at one of the finest resorts in the world. And if you're looking for a great vacation value, look no more. All your daytime fun, all your nighttime entertainment, and all your food is included in one low price. But what makes this resort really great is that it takes you to some of the world's other great vacation spots.
In the morning, in the evening, Carnival's got the fun.
Fun. That's what makes Carnival the most popular cruise line in the world.
There's a thin line between life and death, for road construction workers and for you. Last year, 8 people died in road work zones, and 6 of them were in motor vehicles. Watch for the orange signs, and watch for the other traffic. A little bit of caution now will let them get their jobs done, and we'll all be around to enjoy it later.
Resent your doctor? This woman was told she might die, then propositioned for a date. Bad bedside manners. It's making Americans sick, and they're not taking it anymore. Plus, urban decay. These people became bankers and saved their neighborhood.
Remarkable, isn't it?
It can happen anywhere. The American Agenda on ABC's World News Tonight next week.
And we're back with Los Angeles Police Officer Carl McGill and C. Everett Koop. Dr. Koop, just before the break, Officer McGill was essentially making the point that the NRA makes anyway, and that is the kind of regulation you're talking about would only work with law-abiding citizens. Others will find ways of getting the guns anyway.
Well, it is true in part, but I said you've got to start someplace. I would think that Mr. McGill would like to know that if he is involved in a situation with the criminal intent where they now have a gun and it has a number on it, that he can follow the paper trail of that gun and see where it came from.
We already have that. And
you don't have it on all guns, sir. You just have it on the guns that have them on it. You don't have guns that are imported in this country illegally or that are manufactured in America illegally or are sold on the street with the numbers rubbed off of them.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Okay, well, I agree with you that we need to register the firearms that come into this country. And but in L.A. we have a anti-assault rifle gun. And during the last rebellion that we had in the L.A. area, we had AK-47s that were used against our emergency personnel, like firefighters and police officers, where the guns were illegal to have, but the persons who use them are the same type of person that doesn't follow the rules that we already have.
Let me just...
What I think that we ought to do is make it the laws to the point where if you use an unregistered handgun or unregistered firearm, that you should have to do a minimum time in jail or use some type of deterrent. Now, comparing the two, registering a vehicle or licensing a vehicle does not give it a solution to the problem. All we do is create paperwork and red tape for the person who should be having a gun for protection anyway, and that's the law-abiding citizen.
Let me just, in the minutes that we have left together, tap into both of your experience and wisdom, though, beyond this point. The reality, and I know all three of us can agree on this, the reality is far too many of our young people are being killed and killing one another with handguns. Should not be the case.
And that's the good point I see about the AMA's report. I mean, I commend it for bringing the attention of the African-American male, the inner-city youth, for being the victims. But the point I'm trying to say is that he has to realize that he's missing the target that he's trying to attack. The attack should be towards the person who uses a weapon and does not follow the laws that we already have. The intentions that they're having, the intentions that he has, will only penalize the person who should be able to go to a store and buy a firearm to protect himself or for recreational purposes.
Let me go back to Dr. Koop, because I know you have other ideas beyond simply the registration and licensing of guns.
Well, my concern, Ted, is for the parents that I meet who are living in constant dread.
I agree.
That they'll get a call from their principal someday and say, your kid had an argument and he's now dead. I think what I really hope will happen about this, Ted, is that somebody might come up with a better idea than this, but at least it's a challenge. And I believe if we had a proper debate about this thing in the proper public arena, that people who are threatened by this problem in our society would now come to the point where they say, enough is enough, let's get rid of handguns. And I think that's the way to go.
Now, Dr. Cooper, I agree, Dr. Cooper. I think that if the AMA or any other organization would like to bring in some real people, I mean, I won't say real people, but people who have experienced such the problems such as law enforcement officers, or they bring in persons who have been victims such as myself and people that I grew up with who are now dead, I think that, you know, we will be able to really come down to some good conclusions instead of what we have now, what you propose. I think that any challenge is better than no challenge, but you have to really look at the real problem. I think that the person...
Mr. McGill, let me just interrupt you for a moment, because we've got such a precious few minutes. I want to hear 2 or 3 good, quick ideas from you then.
Well, I think that what I suggested earlier is to have a minimum jail sentence for possession of...
Fine, that's one idea. You already suggested it. Let's go on to the next one.
And the second one is to... there's a 14-day wait for to buy a handgun anyway. I think within that 14 days, a person should be required to go through some type of educational process or some type of training. I mean, that 14 days that the buyer is waiting on anyway is dead time right now. Just use that 14 days, educate them on the proper usage of a handgun, and train them how to use the gun instead of just selling it to them over the counter. I think that we should go through an educational process.
Now, Dr.
I think Mr. McGill is suggesting what I did, Ted.
I was just going to ask you, because what you are also suggesting is that this be perceived as a health care problem. Explain in the couple of minutes that we've got left now how you treat this as a health care problem in terms of coming to a solution?
Well, I think once you decide it's a healthcare problem and not a pure law enforcement problem, then you bring into play all of the tools of public health, such as epidemiology, and find out where things are happening, why they're happening, and begin to attack behavioral causes of the difficulty and not just see it as poverty or problems on the highway or law enforcement. And I think that that is the way to go, because the way that we're going now certainly is not working, because the deaths are escalating by the week.
Officer McGill, you wanted to respond. Go ahead.
Dr. Koop, I agree with what you're saying, and I'm not disagreeing, and I commend you for your efforts on what you've done in the past and what you're doing with the problem with inner city deaths. But I think that we ought to pool our resources together, is what you're saying, and be able to come up with some real solutions, some solutions that will help out the law enforcement person on the street, as well as not take away civil rights of the law-abiding citizen, and also to abate the problem that we have with inner-city deaths.
And we've only got 45 seconds left. Dr. Koop, in many ways, this is still disproportionately, far disproportionately, a black American problem. Far greater than it is with white youngsters, as
Absolutely.
great as it may be.
But it's moving into the white suburbs.
Fine. How do you, in the last few seconds that we have left, how do you convince all people who are watching tonight that it's their problem?
Because where it is now is just for today. Where it'll be tomorrow is with your children.
All right. See Everett Koop and Officer Carl McGill. Thank you both very much for being with us. I'll be back in a moment.
Thank you.
Inside and out, Sears has your paint needs covered. Pick up Weather Beater exterior or Easy Living interior flat finishes. Your choice, only $10.99 a gallon. But hurry, this terrific paint sale ends soon.
Hi, and it's code for 148 North St. Andrews, Fowler, heard nothing. 81 clear. 8814 clear.
Of all the things around your house that need batteries, there's one thing that needs a good, fresh battery most of all. See your Allstate agent for a free home fire safety brochure. And please, check the battery in your smoke detector often.
Each year, corporate America spends over $10 billion on overnight shipping. Yet according to a report in the Wall Street Journal, $3 billion of that is wasted. If you find that kind of inefficiency alarming, call UPS. We can save you up to 40% on overnight deliveries and help prevent your profits from going up in smoke. UPS. We run the tightest ship in the shipping business.
Recycling's easy if you got the right stuff and you know what to do. So don't make a mess. Just ask Ace.
Ace Harmony trash bags are just $1.97, and Ace siliconized acrylic caulk is 88 cents a tube.
Ace Best Buy is another reason Ace is the place for you.
I heard you guys got a great deal on the '93 Ford Escort.
Not a deal, a whole new way of buying. 4 Escorts, one price, $10,499.
Not so fast. I want power steering, rear defrost, and a good stereo.
Still one price.
All right, I want air conditioning. And what if I want a hatchback or a sedan?
$10,499.
Right now, you can get any one of 4 new 93 Escorts, all well-equipped for only $10,499. No gimmicks, no hidden costs. See your Ford dealer today.
How about a wagon?
$10,499.
Just checking.
On Monday, a Nightline special investigation of a Cold War mystery man. Joel Barr, a friend of the Rosenbergs and a suspected spy himself. A Brooklyn-born engineer who led a second life in the Soviet Union. As a top engineer, he's back with a story that stretches the imagination. That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
This has been Nightline.
Nightline is a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
Saturday, Eddie Murphy needs some arms control.
We just turned that Sheik's car to Mercedes skateboard.
But this engineer's a real dud. Dudley Moore. Eddie Murphy.
Do Michael Jackson. I'm not in this war.
Best defense.
I'm from Cleveland.
Saturday.
Fair overnight with a low in the lower 60s.